Hello, neighbor. I'm Robert Burns, and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And I am so thrilled to come before you and to portray the results of our litigation against Colonel Lamar Davis. And you may say, well, why do you have a big smile on your face, especially given the headline of the article? Well, it's one of those situations where I could not lose, and don't you love being in those situations where you cannot lose? Judge Johnson, after all the extensive efforts I had to go through to get the letters of counseling in front of him, Judge Johnson had two options, one of which was to sign state police's judgment, and one of which to sign mine. Now, he opted to sign state police's judgment. And not only did he sign theirs, but he signed it less than 24 hours after it was submitted. We'll get to that in just a moment. But you saw the feature of today's headline. It said that with regard to our judgment, or specifically mine, I guess, it says to, quote, file as is. See judgment signed on June 22nd, 2022. To which we're going to encourage voters in East Baton Rouge Parish. Now, there'll be a pretty good chance that Judge Johnson will be on your ballot this fall. And so what I am, so many times people have asked, well, what can we do to support you? And of course, I've always said, please don't send money. I'm not going to accept it. If you have tips of corruption, I'll gladly accept that. And of course, I get way more than I could ever possibly hope to try to handle. We are in Louisiana, of course. But if you really want to help me, I'm going to encourage you to do something. If you're in East Baton Rouge Parish, I'm going to encourage you to go out. There will be, from everything I'm told, 5 candidates in the race, 1 Democrat and 4 Republicans. The 1 Democrat being Judge Don Johnson. Imagine that. And so, let me just say this. We recently had a judge's race. Now, this is just for 19th JDC. And it was a competition between Mr. Myers and the gentleman's other name, Faircloth, Jordan Faircloth. I just had a momentary blank out there. And I get really excited about these little teeny tiny elections. Now, why is that? Well, it's because my vote means way, way, way more in an election like that than it does in one where the turnout is 80%. Now, I will admit I'm just like anybody else. I can have a propensity to forget that the election is going on because they don't draw much fanfare, especially when the turnout's going to be about 6%, as it was for that election. So what I do, I have an old pair of Crocs, and I will prop one of those Crocs up right next to this door here, and I do that days beforehand, and that serves as a reminder. So wait a minute, what's going on? Oh, yeah, there's an election, and I make sure I go out and vote. So I'm one of these chronic voters that strives now. I think I've probably missed maybe 1 or 2 elections in my lifetime to always vote. If there's something on the ballot, I'm there to vote. Now, consequently, that puts me on some lists for which the opinions are valued, so to speak. And I got just such a text here about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and talked about several races, but one of which was the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And so basically what we're looking at, I wanted to continue on with that. I went out and voted. Happy to state that I voted for Ben Myers. He prevailed. But here's the deal. He prevailed by a grand total of 2 votes. Okay? And from what I'm told, there were a group of 5 that now in the primary, Faircloth had the commanding lead. Okay? It was originally a 3-person race. And Faircloth had a pretty commanding lead, and sometimes that can lull you into false sense of complacency and a runoff. It's a whole new election, folks. It's a whole new election. Don't let a commanding lead in the primary go to your head. All right. You can just ask Edwin Edwards back in the congressional race back in 2014, and he had a pretty decent lead, but he knew it was over because he knew though all of the other candidates were going to coalesce around Garrett Graves in the runoff, and of course they did. And Edwin Edwards, the late Edwin Edwards, certainly smart enough to realize that. But at any rate, on this particular election, it came down to Faircloth and Myers, and I always look at campaign finance reports when it comes down to a judge's race. And when I saw that Faircloth was loaded down, I mean loaded down with trial attorneys, I said, oh, okay, all right. So meanwhile, there are some on Ben Myers' now he ran, in my opinion, much better ads than Faircloth did. But beyond that, in Myers, there are some attorneys, and probably the most noteworthy of which is Jack Whitehead. And it's right there on the campaign finance report for anybody to see. He contributed $2,500 to the Ben Myers campaign. He had yard signs in his office, and if you're wondering, yes, I would have had occasion to drop by and visit Jack on a couple of occasions leading up to the election. But at any rate, from what I'm told, there was a group of 5 Faircloth supporters that were hell-bent on going to the Garth Brooks concert. I believe that's what was going on that particular day. And, that's a big thing here, LSU Tiger Stadium. Now, remember, that's five, okay? And from what I'm told, they were, in a vehicle, a van, whatever the case. And, one of them says, you know what? We forgot to go vote. They said, it doesn't matter. You got plenty of room to spare. Well, plenty of room to spare turned out to be those 5 votes would have flipped the election, okay? So as I go down that Faircloth campaign finance report and I see all this money put up, I know like Gordon McKernan, okay, $5,000, that's nothing for him. They had to refund $1.30 because I think, I believe that's, I don't know, I get them confused. I looked at quite a few because he went slightly over the campaign contribution limit, and hope I got him as the one that did that. But at any rate, $5,000 for Gordon McKernan would be about like you or I going and putting a quarter in the slot, $5,000, all right, easy come, easy go, not even make a dent. But the thing about these races, these little judgeship races, you typically don't have but about $40, $50, maybe $60,000 is all that's raised to finance them. So you can see where, for instance, Mr. Whitehead's contribution of $2,500, well, that means a lot in the Myers campaign. So Myers prevails by 2 votes, okay, which means that my vote surely was important. And so I said all that to say this. I'm asking you for us to be able to say to Don Johnson, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Mr. Johnson and some of his past in just a moment, that once the election is completed, and when I'm saying completed, I mean December 10th, because it's a virtual certainty, in my opinion, that Johnson will be in the runoff, because, as I said, they're full Republicans, at least nothing's official until folks actually file qualifying papers, which should be next month. But going on the premise that these 5 gentlemen qualify, 4 Republicans, 1 Democrat, common sense would dictate to you that Judge Johnson probably will be in the runoff. And let's face it, this fall's elections, unless something drastic happens, there's not going to be a lot of intrigue, okay? John Kennedy is a lock. You can take that to the bank. It's not even going to be a race. In fact, Gary Chambers is probably only in the race to build up some name recognition to try to leverage that for next year's governor's race, and I'm sure Jeff Landry and his camp are really trying to do a whole bunch of things behind the scenes to get Gary Chambers in that race, figuring that Chambers at 33, give or take, say 32%. Landry's got a rock solid 32. As Edwin Edwards used to say, that only leaves 36 for everybody else to fight over. And if they can just, the Landry camp, I'm talking about, can just get him and Gary Chambers into the runoff, it will be a peace walk in the park for Jeff Landry. So that's their strategy, just laying it out. But at any rate, it's my goal on December the 10th for us to be able to say, with regard to Judge Don Johnson, we are filing him away, remaining in 19th JDC, see election results of 12/10/2022. Remember what he said in my judgment. File as is. See signed judgment of June 22nd, 2022. Which was one day after they were due. But we learned so much from this litigation that I commenced. We learned, number one, LSP is scared to death of getting these letters of counseling out to the public, letters of counseling warning. it's the fact that LSPC scrambled in there in the last minute to file an amicus brief lets you know, hey, there's plenty in those letters of counseling / warning that they don't want you seeing. And Judge Johnson has helped ensure that we don't see it. So that's the goal, is for us to be able to say to Judge Johnson, now hear what I'm saying, on December the 10th, we have filed you as is in the 19th JDC, see election results of December 10th, 2022. Now, let me just for a moment here, and we'll give you the four Republican challengers are supposed to be in the race, but we're going to give you the link for this. You know, I feel like, you know, many of you may not know Judge Johnson all that well, and let me just say this. The second, when I filed my suit, and I said, okay, which section am I? They said 24, Judge Johnson. I immediately called, I'll tell you, I called several friends. I called Billy Broussard, most noteworthy, who would love to see what's in these letters of counseling. And I said, look, let me tell you one thing. You ain't seeing them, okay? I said, we will milk this for all it's worth, but you can forget getting those documents. The second I learned which judge it was, I knew we were dead. Doesn't mean I didn't go in there and put on the best case that I could. Didn't mean I didn't go in there and give the best performance I could. I did everything I had, but I knew we were dead the second I saw the judge that we had drawn. Now, we may have been dead with a few others, no doubt about it, but I knew we were dead in the water with this judge. All right, let's just say, and we're going to give you the link for this. Let's talk a little bit about a noteworthy case that Judge Johnson had in the past. Johnson presided over former Agriculture Commissioner Bob Odom's conspiracy and money laundering case. Johnson dismissed the case, citing the time for prosecution had dispensed. The Louisiana Supreme Court overruled him and sent the case back to trial. Now, to many of you, if you're young enough, you don't even know who Bob Odom is. He was the agriculture commissioner from 1980 till about, I don't know, 2007, give or take. You'll notice in Louisiana when they get in there, they tend in there to be a long time. He got quite comfortable in that, and he was indicted now. Keyword indicted. It did not say convicted. He was indicted on 21 counts involving money laundering, bribery, public corruption, using agricultural labor to work on his private enterprise, everything. Now, gradually, this charge would be dropped, that charge would be dropped. He had Mary Olive Pearson as one of his chief legal, along with, I believe, Carl Koch, if I remember right, was the other attorney. Don't hold me to that. But at any rate, slowly but surely, everything finally faded away, and that was that. With the final count being, I think, injuring public records or something of that nature, it had to be transferred to the Opelousas area, and Earl Taylor was that DA. You may remember we did a feature on Mr. Taylor involving some DWIs for Marvin Henderson's grandson and Scott Perilou and Earl Taylor's clear corruption there. So at any rate, that was the last and final count, and it was dropped. So out of those 21 counts, he ultimately was not found guilty on anything. But you can bet, presumably, Miss Pearson and some others didn't do all this for free. So, but at any rate, Judge Johnson's original plan to just say, well, it wasn't filed in time, didn't fly. Now let's talk about a few disciplinary actions for Judge Johnson, then we'll talk about some DWI citations. The Louisiana Judiciary Commission recommended Judge Don Johnson be censured for improperly ordering people convicted of crimes, mostly drug offenses, to pay fines to 36 private organizations, including the Southern University baseball team, 2 high school band departments, the Baton Rouge Zoo. The commission also recommended that the Louisiana Supreme Court publicly censure Johnson for allowing his now former judicial assistant to work for a federal agency while still employed by the judge. The panel contends that Johnson violated the Code of Judicial Conduct in both instances. So you can start to see a little bit better why I knew we were dead the second I heard the judge that we got. But I want to point out, hey, I presented it all to him. Talked about, the only discipline being for Dakota DeMoss, played that radio too loud, all that was put in front of him. All of it was already argued orally. And he said, file Mr. Burns's judgment as is. See judgment signed on June 22nd, which is LSP's judgment. We already gave you that judgment, but we will give you the official signed one as well. Now, beyond that, we have a couple of DWI situations with Judge Johnson, the first of which was in March 2001, and he was arrested for first offense DWI, but a Baton Rouge City Court judge acquitted him later that year. Imagine that. The Honorable John Johnson out driving around, or allegedly driving around drunk. From what I'm told, he wasn't the most cooperative arrestee in that incident, but I guess he surely didn't. It's a good thing he didn't run into the crew up there from Monroe. I guess we'll let it go at that. So at least he had a little experience with law enforcement, to maybe empathize with Antonio Harris, Aaron Bowman, or Ronald Green, three individuals which were brought out clearly to him. Hey, if I said it once, I said it 30 times. A minimum of 30. If Judge Johnson deems these letters of counseling warning to need to remain sealed from the public, that's what's going to be the case. Yeah, if you look at their judgment, I have the right to appeal. Hell will freeze over 10 times before I would go to that crew that's at First Circuit Court of Appeals. And here's the thing, this gentleman wants to go join them. Now, I will ask you, the type of things I'm reading off, is this somebody you want to see on the First Circuit? Better get out and vote, folks, when it comes to December 10th. All right, we got another instance in May of 2003. Johnson was cited for misdemeanor counts of hit and run, failure to maintain control of a motor vehicle, and driving without proof of insurance. His court date was scheduled for July 1. A witness at the scene indicated Johnson smelled strongly of beer, but Johnson did not take a breath test to prove or disprove his claim. All right, so we've given you a little bit of the problematic nature of Judge Johnson and why we're really encouraging all of those who ask, well, what can I do? We're going to ask you both in the November 8th primary and especially in the December 10th primary to get out there and vote. I haven't yet given you the 4 Republicans that will be running. We're going to list them on the screen. Those are Hunter Green, who is a family court judge, Bo Higginbotham, I believe Bo may, no, Bo is in my regular 19th ADC. An interesting little thing about Bo, and I consider this a positive, but I'm not endorsing any one of the 4, okay? I talked about this at length with a couple of good friends of mine over the weekend, and I'm not going to formally endorse any one of the 4. Bo Higginbotham is presently suing all of his colleagues. Basically, he's claiming that, hey, I should have been next in line to start getting some civil cases versus criminal. And it seems that they didn't go along with that, even though he claims he had the seniority. They want to say there was a break in his service. And so when they convened, Don Johnson said, I believe we ought to send these civil matters to my twin brother, Ron Johnson. And I have to say this. We at Sound Off Louisiana owe a tremendous debt of gratitude. Hear what I'm saying. A tremendous debt of gratitude for that having been done. And Ron Johnson getting the case where Michael Dubose, he's the attorney for George Harper, or he was at one time George Harper, Jacob Brown, and the whole crew, and he filed a what? Temporary restraining order to block Louisiana State Police from continuing with administrative investigations. This is Don Johnson's brother now, okay? It was that restraining order, and that's the way I reported it, and we're going to give you the link for it, because I consider that very significant, that Michael Dubose had little trouble, well, he didn't have any trouble, getting a restraining order from which judge? Ron Johnson, the twin brother of Don Johnson. Now, how did he get that? Well, I can tell you, both Don Johnson and Ron Johnson are unbelievably lazy. In fact, when I first told an attorney that I correspond with regularly who drew the case, and look, I already knew this, but anyway, he said, here's going to be your biggest challenge, Robert. He said, your biggest challenge is going to be merely getting him to read anything. And they're both lazy from the vantage point too. I've been in their courtrooms numerous times, and both of them are going to say to each, just as they did with us, I want you to draw for your final findings of facts, conclusions of law, and judgment. In other words, give us exactly what you want, and then I'm going to sign one of the two, which means one attorney's going to get a slam dunk and the other one's going to be out in the cold. I have seen it happen numerous times. And so it was Ron Johnson signing that restraining order, which I happened to be at the State Police Commission. I was the only media outlet there. Now you got a lot more interest in the media, but back then I was the only one. And DuBose started posing the same arguments about, hey, Colonel Davis is out of control, all right? He has no authority to do what he's doing, and so forth. Then I find out, we're going to have the hearing on the same matter later today at 19th JDC. And so I asked after the meeting was over, Michelle Gerard, one of the attorneys for LSP, was kind enough to bring me fully up to speed. And so I go to the hearing, but before I go to the hearing, I said, well, I gotta go see just what has he filed here? What has DuBose filed? Well, that's where all those texts came from, okay? All the ones about the bragging of beating Antonio Harris, what a whooping we put on him, all of this, okay? And every bit of that's in my pleadings. Judge Johnson, if he reads anything, which I don't think he does, I'm talking about Don Johnson now, but Ron Johnson, all of that was in this for what the prelude to the temporary restraining order. And Ron Johnson just, and so, look, when a judge signs a temporary restraining order, that's it, end of ball game. LSP had to freeze that investigation, okay? Now, I can pretty much guarantee you that Ron Johnson didn't have a clue what he had signed, but once it's signed, that's it. So they have to stop the investigation, and Faye Morrison has to go in front of Judge Johnson and start arguing about how damning what he has done is, because it stopped not only those investigations, but all the kickoff or sidekick investigations. But I can't thank Ron Johnson enough, because let me tell you something. We gained more subscribership at Sound Off Louisiana in the week that we reported that incident, okay, than any week in our history. So thank you very much, Judge Ron Johnson, even though when it comes to your brother and his aspirations of getting to the First Circuit Court of Appeals, look, if you live in East Baton Rouge, or you know of someone who lives in East Baton Rouge, go out there and vote against him. I'm telling you, voters are much more motivated to vote against someone than they are to vote for someone. Now, so I told you about Bo Higginbotham and him signing his colleagues. I told you about Hunter Green. I mentioned him briefly as family court judge. Trey Welch is another candidate. He was longtime councilman, and I think he has served as a city judge. I'm not positive, up in Zachary. Now I'm missing somebody, so I'm sure whoever I'm missing is going to. I don't prepare notes for any of this stuff. So let's see: Higginbotham, Green. Boy, this is a little frustrating. Welsh, Higginbotham, Green, Welsh. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies, Tim Kelly. Judge Tim Kelly is supposed to be the fourth Republican. And this proves I don't have notes, doesn't it? So Judge Tim Kelly is also supposed to be a candidate for the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, one advantage that Judge Johnson would have if he does make this is there would be an elevation in his salary up to, I believe, $152,000, give or take. So he's probably trying to set up for that high three, just like all of the state employees would do. Now, he just won re-election to another term as 19th JDC. They serve 6-year terms. He's presently 59 years old. I know where you're wondering, all right, you're trying to find out how much longer we got to put up with Don Johnson. And that is exactly what I'm doing. So with him having won in 2020, and he's presently 59, he would come up for election again in 2026, talking about at 19th JDC, which by my math should put him 63, which would mean that he could, I believe, if I did the math right on this, he'd be 69 when he came up for re-election again. And the rule says, I'm talking about the rule, right now, if you're over 70, you got to step down. Thank God. Look, these judges tried to put through a constitutional amendment that wanted to let them serve after age 70. That required a constitutional amendment. They got it through the House. They got it through the Senate with the 2/3 votes. It went before the public, and the public said, not no, but hell no. All right, they were about as emphatic as you could be. So in theory, we could have Judge Johnson for not just this 6 years, then another 6, and at any rate, whereas if he makes it to First Circuit Court of Appeals, he would serve one 10-year term, and he might be able to squeeze in another one, because the way it works is, if you turn 70 during your term, you get to continue on and serve out the remainder of your term. They don't force you to step down once you turn 70 if you're in some stage of your term. So, and let me just say this, and we'll wrap this up. As I mentioned before in a previous video on this, Judge Johnson is also overseeing the trial of the LSTA versus LSPC. That's all to do with the political contributions and LST, the Louisiana State Troopers Association. Their emphatic belief that, hey, we have a constitutional right to make political campaign contributions. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are going to be a number of witnesses called, at least the LSPC, that's Louisiana State Police Commission, have scheduled witnesses like Mr. Perry, Mr. Bucky Miette, and there's a couple of others. I'd have to go back and look at who they are. I'm sure these retired troopers, all of whom I know are just upstanding folk that are just literally devastated by what LSP has become. I'm sure they will do their duty and come into court and testify. This whole thing's going to be a dog and pony show, all right? Because with this judge, I can tell you right now, LSTA is going to prevail, all right? They've already prevailed in the peremptory exception, dealing with rather authoritatively. Judge Johnson just had Floyd Falcon draft everything as he wanted. Now, like I said, he's going to sign one or two. And so he signed Falcon being the attorney for LSTA. So the little dog, now there is one possibility. Johnson may say, you know what, I'm right in the midst of a election here. This is a first sitting. Let's push this off. And then if he wins to the First Circuit, well, he may not even have to try the case, period. But I'm sure LSTA doesn't want that. They say, Your Honor, let's get this sucker on the road. All right. They have to be licking their chops for this upcoming court hearing. Now, I will be there, but as I just said, I believe what you're going to see is a dog and pony show, much as was the case in the suit that I just filed. All right, with regard to the cheating scandal, I'm going to be working in earnest on it, as I said on a previous feature that we just put out. July 9th is right now my anticipated release date. I will say this, I did get my return receipt about the certified letter to Colonel Davis, strongly encouraging him not to destroy LSP Training Academy records. The good news is, an internal source let me know, and I read it entirely. He's issued an order across the board. Don't destroy anything while we're under this pattern and practice investigation. All right. He says, I don't care what the records retention policy is, you're not to destroy anything. So I certainly appreciate, Colonel Davis, you taking that initiative. And Training Academy records was specifically referenced in there. Now, I'd like to think it may have been partially as a result of my email to Jason Hanneman, perhaps the certified letter, but at any rate, that was certainly a good move. Now, as I wrap this up, I'm just going to tell you, I'm getting, flooded with so many emails about how bad things are at Louisiana State Police. And I'm going to try to cover everything gradually as we progress. I mean, it is a toxic work environment over there. Race relations are at an all-time low. And believe me, people are getting very specific in that regard. But I don't want to cram all of that, obviously, into this feature. But we will gradually get those things turned out. As you probably have seen, I'm very methodical in the way I do things. I don't just flap together, spend 25 minutes drafting an article, hit the publish button. So I want to thank everyone for all of their dedication. Again, we're going to emphasize that Judge Johnson said with regard to our ruling, he said, file as is. See judgment signed on June 22nd, 2022. If you want to help in stopping to root out corruption in this type of, I read you all the stuff that Johnson's been involved with in the past. A leopard doesn't change his stripes, okay? So there was never any realistic hope that those documents were ever going to be provided to the public, okay? Doesn't match fighting corruption, and he's a big part of the corruption problem in the state of Louisiana. He's far from alone in judges in 19 JDC that I would deem as problematic, but he is certainly near the top of the list. By the way, I never did get that filing from Greg Farenholt. I never got it. You reckon they just didn't put it in the mail like they said they did? I just felt compelled to mention that in the end, because that's another thing we revealed. You know, Farenholt obviously didn't have a clue about the difference between letters of counseling versus letters of reprimand. I educated everyone on that, and I'll having to be paid the court cost to make that education. Now, once the 30-day window of appeal has lapsed, because they're not going to give me the public records once it's still, quote, appealable, which ain't going to happen. But you have my word, I'm going to make a public records request, and we're going to find out just how much money LSP spent on these attorneys down in Metairie defending my action to keep transparency. You got to pay for the troopers, you got to pay for the attorneys, you got to pay, and you're not entitled to anything. I mean, we as taxpayers, I mean, it's just like, you know what, and take it up, you know what. I didn't say a word there, I was very vague. So, but that's basically what is going on here, all right? I can see why they retained the law firm they did. Back in 2015, that firm successfully got a 0 verdict on an alleged LSP brutality case in New Orleans, and it was said that the plaintiffs failed to demonstrate pattern and practice. Wonder if there'd be the same finding today. Folks, thank you for turning in. Thank you for your dedication. So you've now gotten the update. That'll conclude this whole Burns versus Davis deal, because as I said, hell will freeze over 10 times before I would ever appeal this thing. So it is over, and I consider it a resounding victory, notwithstanding the way it may look on the surface. And I want to remind everyone, if you're in East Baton Rouge Parish, now you have 4 options. Now I can remember Kelly's name. I apologize, Judge Kelly. But you have Welch, Kelly, Hunter Green, and Bo Higginbotham. Those are your 4 alternatives to Judge Johnson. So I know which one I'm going to vote for, but I'm going to leave that to folk to decide. The important thing is that you not vote for Don Johnson. Okay, I feel certain he's going to make the runoff, but we need to stop him dead in his tracks right there. Thank you so much, and we'll be getting back with you with another feature, and we're still projecting July 9th for the big release of the Louisiana State Police Training Academy cheating scandal feature. Thank you once again.